All right, so this video is about what you do in the office and getting out of there, like what I do to get out of the office, basically. All the stuff I have to do at the office before I deliver mail on the road. Here we go. So first off, a word about casing. So there's a couple things about casing that you should be aware of if you work in a few different offices. Every office is a little bit different. Um, So yeah, so first of all, standing up flats versus tack wings. So you've got these shelves. Usually they'll have the shelving units will have set up so there's 6 shelves. That's what I usually see. Some people make it tighter and have 7 shelves. Some people have it so wide they'll have like 4 or 5 shelves instead, and then you have more room. So standing up flats is the quickest if it kind of works, but sometimes what winds up happening is, so when I say stand-up flats, you shove it in the divider like that, okay? Um, or versus tacoing, which is like when you curl it up like this and you shove it in the slot and then you put the mail inside, okay? Well, a couple things about that. So you can fit more in if you're standing up than you can if you're tacoing. But the thing I don't like about standing up is I'm usually in a office where we have 6 shelves and it's kind of tight. And so it has to bend over a little bit. And then what can wind up happening is as you're putting mail in or tearing down, it can flip over and wind up in another slot. I just don't like that. And I first learned how to taco. So that's kind of what I go with. But again, it's kind of what works best for you. Uh, Thought I'd mention that. So I do taco, all right. But if you get a lot of flats, that might be impossible. Oh yeah, moving on. Addresses and dividers. So again, in my office, it's a little bit different. We have dividers between almost every address. So almost every address has a divider between it. It's its own little slot. But some addresses are like this, where you have offices are like this, where you have 2 addresses for one larger slot. So you have that divider pulled out. What that allows for is if one of them has a little bit more mail that day, you've got a little bit more room and so on. It makes it a little more flexible. But it makes it trickier when you're doing your flats because like, okay, if I've got 200, if I see a flat lying there, is it for the address 200 or is it for the address 202? I don't know. So you have to have a system. Basically what I do is if it would be for 202, okay, the one address on the right, whatever that is, the address on the right, I'd push it all the way in. If it was for 200, I'd leave it hanging out a little bit. Some people do the opposite. Doesn't matter. You're communicating with yourself. So whatever works for you, but that's the way I do it. Okay, all the way in if it's for the one on the right, hanging out a little bit if it's for the one on the left. That way you don't have to check it. You know which one it's for when you're putting in other flats or mail. Okay, once they both have a flat, then you can push them both all the way in. Okay, so just a note about that before I move on, because that's something that changes in offices. All right, the steps I follow on my regular route. So this is what I do on a Saturday when I come in the door. This is how I get started. So the first thing I do is I check my holds. I see which ones are expiring and which ones are still active. If they're expiring, I take the stick out or the sticker off, depending on how they're marking the holds on the case. And then I put the mail where it belongs. If it's laying off to the side, I put it in the slot. If there's not room, if it's a bucket or something, I'll basically mark it like a parcel. But I'll take care of those holds first. Now I use partial sheets instead of marking my parcels. So on this sheet, see I've got all the street names on it. This is the top 3 rows right there. And then on the back side, I've got the bottom 3 rows. So what I'll do is if I have a hold, I'll write it in like red ink right next to it. In little numbers, I'll write down the address that has a hold or a vacancy. That way I know not to put mail in that box. It's a different color than my package. So that's what I do for holds, okay? After I take care of my holds, the next thing I take care of is box holders and newspapers. So if I can, like if I have an LLV that day, or if there's a way to do it in my car, if there's something that everybody gets, especially if it's sloppy, I will try to take that on the side. I don't want to spend half an hour putting something that goes in every mailbox, right? If I can just take that on the side, I will do that. But if I've got a nice wide box holder and almost everybody has it, well, I can make a nice bundle and make it easy just to grab and throw when I'm on the street. So kind of weigh that. How good of a box holder is it? How good of a wrapper will it make for everything? How good of a separator? It might be worth the extra time because it really makes pulling down easier, which I'll talk about in a minute, if you have that divider for almost every address. And then after I take care of all those bigger things, the bigger box holders in the newspapers, whether they're going in or going on the side, then what I'll do is I'll take care of my mixed flats. So I've got a bucket usually of magazines, catalogs, newspapers, right? I'll take those and I'll put them in. If it's a little thing, like a little half sheet or something, I will set that on the side and do the big ones first, and then come back to them later after I've done all the other flats, okay? But I like to take care of the mixed ones first because they do have to go out to the street. You can't hold them for another day. They've got to go out to the street. So I take care of those mixed flats right away. And then I do the ordered flats. And again, here, you want to do the first class stuff first. Your magazines should go first, okay? Get those in, because if you start to run out of time, you can always, well, it depends on your office, but you may be able to, if you're a sub, to set those aside, those catalogs, and they could be done another day, but not the magazines, okay? So I try to get those out as well, the ordered flats, okay? And then after I take care of that, then I'll move on to my DPS. Now I take most of my DPS to the street because it's just faster. I think it takes me, like, if I've got a tray of DPS, it can take me 20 minutes to put that in, depending on how much is in there. And then it's going to take longer to pull down too. So I don't know, if I've got just 3 trays of DPS, that's an hour spent just putting DPS in my boxes, not to mention how much longer it's going to take me to pull down. So I like to take it on the side. Now, some people say they can do it faster, 10 minutes a tray, whatever, and that's fine. If you're fast at it and you like to do it, that's okay, but it's just not for me. I would rather take my DPS on the side, but I take care of it. So what I do with my DPS is I'll put in the stuff I'm going to put in. If there's a section that's on a busy road with clusters, so I'll put that in, but the rest of it, I'll go put in my car, sit behind the seat, okay? Or just kind of get it organized on the pipe if I'm in another office, just so I've got my DPS ready to go. After I take care of my DPS, oh, I didn't say this. You do want to make sure that it's somewhat in order, kind of take a peek in between it. You're always going to have some missed throws in there, but you want to look for big chunks, like the other day, I had a stack this thick of letters for another route. And if I wouldn't have looked, they just wouldn't have got that mail that day. They would have had to wait till Monday. So, all right. But anyways, after I do the DPS, then I go take care of my hotcase. I check my hotcase to see if anything's in there, any new holds, any misthrown letters, that sort of thing. Grab that stuff and go take care of it. And then once the hotcase is done, then I take care of my parcels. My big ones, I take out to my car. I wheel them out to my car right away, and I write them down on my sheet as I put them in the car in order, somewhat, somewhat. The top row goes right behind me. The second row goes right with that, and so on, and the stuff from the 6th row, the last row, is all buried. That's what I do. I just kind of organize it in my car as I write it down. And then the little parcels, what I've been doing lately, since I don't have a lot of mail in there, I just put it in my case. I put it in my case, and when I tear down, the little parcels go in with my flats. Now that sounds like an extra step, and it is, but it's not taking that much more time than just putting them in order. And it's not like I'm marking them, number one. Number two, the other thing that's nice about it is because, I'm putting them in the trays are lighter because I have, instead of mail and flats, I have parcels and flats. So those trays are lighter. Okay. So those are the steps. That's what I do before I pack up to go to the street. That's how I organize stuff. Okay. That's a little bit different if I'm working on a new route. If I'm working on a new route, it changes a little bit. I make a quick map of the case. So I usually bring a sheet of paper that looks like this with me. If I don't, I can just quickly draw some lines on a white piece of paper. And basically what I'll do, so like this is like the left shelving unit. This is the center. Ooh, sorry about that, C. This is the right shelving unit, okay? And so what I'll do is I'll just write the street names on here, you know, whatever it is, like if there's Elm, and then Main on the third row, whatever. I'll just write the street names quickly. I'll write the street names quickly on here. And it only takes about 5 minutes, but this gives me something to look at. If I'm trying to find, like if I'm casing and it's a route I'm not familiar with and I pick up the thing, it says, oh, 1255 Elm. I can kind of quickly look at this piece of paper and see which shelving unit has Elm listed, right? And then I can look for that address there. It's just a little bit simpler just to look at those street names rather than all the addresses as well. It's a little less overwhelming. Plus, you're not looking all over like this. You're just looking on a single piece of paper. So I find it on my piece of paper, and then I can locate it on the case as I'm casing. So if it's a new route, that's the step I'll take. I'll do that. Plus, if I'm going to do the route again, then it allows me to make a parcel sheet because I know what streets are on that row, or in that row, I should say. Okay. All right. So that's one way that changes, is that I make that kind of quick parcel sheet, okay, a map of the case, just to kind of let me know where things are. And again, it only takes a few minutes, but if I'm unfamiliar with it, it's better than trying to learn it by just kind of hunting and pecking. Then after that, I'll take care of my ordered flats before my mixed flats. That's the other difference. Rather than doing my mixed flats first, which I do on a route I'm familiar with, I'll do the ordered ones first because it's easier if they're in order, and it helps me to learn the case then. Because then I'll remember, oh yeah, Bobo Link was over here. I remember, you know, you get a little bit of that. It's easier to find the ordered one, so might as well do that first, okay? All right, and then a word about pulling down. So I like to take my mail in waffle trays, those hard trays. I take my own vehicle, so, and it's a wider car, it's a Taurus X, which is a big kind of crossover. So I just kind of lean one end on my center console and the other end down on my seat, and I've got enough room where it's not really in my way. I can work out of that tray. I used to use bundles, but after an election week where I had 18 bundles and I wasn't even halfway done, I stopped doing that. So I use trays. A lot of people use bundles. Moving on. So 2 different ways to pull. You can pull flat. So that's like the fastest thing. Even if they're in a taco, one of the fastest carriers I know, what he does is he pulls flat. So he just goes through, starts at the end, pulls flats, he goes along and makes a big stack and then sets it in the tray and then goes again. And he can get that whole case emptied in about, I don't know, 2-3 minutes. It's fast. And I've done that before, and it goes really quick. The downside of it, though, is when you're out on the street, then you've got to kind of like pick through your flats to look at it. So pulling flat is one way to do it. A lot of carriers crisscross. So one is standing up, and then the next one laying down, standing up, laying down, standing up, so that you can grab all the mail for that address and feel pretty confident about it as you put it into the box. But totally up to you. It's going to take longer to do the crisscross, but it saves you a little bit of a headache on the street. Yeah, but it can take like 10-15 minutes to pull down that way, crisscrossing. It's going to take longer than pulling flat. All right, bundles. So if I have like a box holder that's nice, I've done this before. I've seen another carrier do it where they make bundles with rubber bands. And the nice thing about bundles is you can, depending on how big your hands are, you can grab like 3, 4, 5 bundles like tacos, grab them with your hand, pull them all out of the case at once, take a rubber band, slap it around those 3, 4, 5 tacos, and then lay it down in a DPS tray. Okay, lay it down in a DPS tray. And then when you are out delivering, you just pull it out of you pull the rubber band off the next set of bundles, next set of tacos, and you just grab your taco, put it in the mailbox, grab the next taco, put it in the mailbox. You can either have the address on the outside and just look at it, or you can pop it open and look. But it's a pretty quick way to do it. If you're using a box holder and you're casing it and you're putting the DPS in, this is really quick out on the street. It's pretty fast to pull down too, because you're pulling down, like I said, 3 or 4 or 5 at a time, rubber banding them, sticking them in. It goes pretty quick. Now, if you put a rubber band around each one, which some people do, that's going to take a little while. So that's my word about bundles. Okay, that's my word about bundles. Letters. Okay, so sometimes I've done this before. If you're on a route where, like I said, I don't like to case letters, but if you are casing letters in a tray, all right, if you're casing letters to be bundled, you can just kind of crisscross them as you lay them down. In a tray, what I like to do is, one is kind of standing that way, standing horizontally in the tray, you set down, and then the next one, you stand up on one side, like say to the left here, and then the next one is laying down again, and then you stand up the next one to the right, okay? And so on. You kind of crisscross like that. That way, one side doesn't get thicker than the other, and you're less likely to confuse it if one letter should jump or something. You have something small like a postcard. What I'll do is I'll just kind of set that next to another one that's standing vertically. So I'll set it vertically next to one, because if it's a postcard, you might get it stuck between. It's not big enough to separate the other horizontal letters, so I'll stick it next to it, okay? But that's how I put them in the tray if I'm doing letters in a tray, which I don't do a lot of, okay? Well, let me know if you have any more questions. If this video is helpful, great. If you have some suggestions on how to make it better, let me know. Sorry it doesn't have visuals from my office. I do plan to make one on my car and how I set up my car for delivery, because I think that changes. But the big thing I would say is, again, just like in my other video, don't be afraid to try something new, but do it on a lighter day when you have plenty of time to make mistakes. But yeah, it is good to try other things, and you want to do things in a way that's going to help you feel confident that you've delivered mail well and not feel like you're wasting a whole lot of time. All right, talk to you soon.